could ask how many species of algae there are, and I could tell you that there's 50,000 and some change. Could also tell you that they're divided up into two different cell types, eukaryotes, which are, the majority of them that are like you and me, and prokaryotes that look like some weird bacteria that decided it wanted to be a plant for a day. But that doesn't really give you a decent scope of how many types there are and their diversity. So rather than trying to explain the ins and outs of how we classify algae, I'll just approach it like any other science class, starting at the domain. It would explain, quite a bit, one would hope, right? We describe algae as being eukaryotes with the ability to do photosynthesis. That's great and all until you consider the fact that blue-green algae aren't really eukaryotes. So then you move on to kingdom, and maybe that would provide a little bit more clarity on what algae would be. But instead, algae actually encompasses 4 separate kingdoms: protozoa, chromista, planae, and bacteria. So instead of it getting more refined, it just gets a wider scope. Out of the 4 kingdoms that algae encompass, they encompass 14 phylums. And I'm gonna spare you the pain of me trying to say their Latin names, but we'll cover 6 of them and some of the diverse and interesting things that they do. The first being diatoms. Their cell walls are made up of silicate, and they work like little Russian nesting dolls. So whenever they actually divide cellularly, they just pop off and are perpetually just getting smaller and smaller. They'll also make crazy long chains to help stay afloat and stay buoyant in water. With diatoms being some of the most diverse of the species, they're pretty amazing. They actually make up 20 to 30% of the oxygen each year on Earth. They also convert sunlight pretty much straight to sugar and make up the basis for every food chain in most aquatic ecosystems. Another phylum is stoneworts. They look a lot more like your run-of-the-mill aquatic vegetation, and they're not. Although they have rhizomes that look very similar to roots, they're a completely different cell structure. Phylum that encompasses green algae is no less impressive than the diatoms, though. With the majority of them being aquatic, that doesn't stop them from living just about anywhere and everywhere. They form symbiotic relationships with protists, hydras, and fungi to make lichen. It's estimated that almost 8% of the Earth is covered in some form of lichen, and it'll grow anywhere from the Arctic to sides of plants and trees to a rock. You can look at the most problematic phylum, debatably, blue-green algae. They aren't eukaryotes, they're prokaryotes. Their cells are pretty much just a hodgepodge of floating DNA and randomness with some chlorophyll in there. But debatably also one of the most influential, with almost 2.4 billion years ago having changed our atmosphere into an oxygen-rich one and bringing life to Earth. However, in modern day, they'll go into bloom and create cyanotoxins, which can be dangerous to people and animals in the area. Even stranger yet are dinoflagellates. They're named after the spinning motion that they make as they swim through the water. Only maybe half of these species are actually photosynthetic. Others eat organic matter that are in the water, and some are even known to absorb or eat other dinoflagellates. They also have about 2,000 species living and in the fossil record to date. This species also makes up the other form of toxic algal blooms, red tides. Surprisingly enough, red tides aren't actually made up of red algae. With about 6,000 species, they mostly consist of marine environments, playing major parts in reefs, even being known to act as wave breaks to protect other species. It's also probably the only species of algae you've eaten, or at least known you've eaten, in the last year. Nori, usually used in sushi, is a great example of red algae. So when you stop and look at how diverse algae can be, it's hard to really wrap your mind around how complex and different all of these species are. And with that being said, you wouldn't really think about how biologically diverse all of these species are and all of the things that they do. And what's really amazing is that we just take an all-encompassing word and just call it algae.